So we've been talking about Jim Crow, right? Laws that legitimized anti-black racism, laws that legitimized a second-class citizen status upon black people, that legitimized segregation for black people, right? They started in the mid 1870s and they continued on through the mid 1960s, right? Today we're going to talk about the Jim Crow etiquette. Yes. Mannerisms that black people had to have when they were around white people. Yep. Because the Jim Crow laws and Jim Crow etiquette, they worked together to oppress black people. Now, the whole intent of Jim Crow etiquette, it boiled down to one simple rule. Blacks must demonstrate their inferiority to white people by actions, words, and manners. And under no circumstance could a black person assume an air of equality with white people, something that continues to this day. Because at the core was the belief that white people were superior to blacks in intelligence, morality, and civilized behavior. Okay? Now, the following are some Jim Crow etiquette norms that black people had to abide by when they were around white people. Black men could not offer their hand to shake to white men because it implied social equality. And they obviously could not offer their hand to a white woman. Okay? Blacks and whites were not supposed to eat together. If they did, white people were served first, and some sort of partition was to be placed in between them. Under no circumstances was a black male to offer to light the cigarette of a white female. It implied intimacy. Blacks were not allowed to show public affection toward one another in public, especially kissing, because it offended whites. And Jim Crow etiquette said that blacks were to be introduced to whites. Whites were never supposed to be introduced to blacks. And whites did not use courtesy titles such as Mr. and Mrs. Instead, black people were called by their first name. And black people always had to refer to white people by Mr. and Mrs. Yes. And when driving, white people always had the right of way. But there's more. Yeah. If a black person was having a conversation with a white person, they were to never assert or even imply that a white person was lying. Yeah. They were to never assume or say outright that a white person had dishonorable intentions. No. They were to never suggest that a white person came from inferior class or say that they themselves had superior knowledge or intelligence. They were to never curse a white person. They were to never laugh at a white person. They were to never comment upon the appearance of a white female. Yeah. All of these things, black people had to do or say or not say in order to reflect inferiority to white people. And if a black person did not abide by the rules, by Jim Crow law or Jim Crow etiquette, white people resorted to violence to reinforce those rules. White people commonly justified lynchings and horrible murders of black people during Jim Crow era as defensive actions in response to black violations of Jim Crow laws. Lynchings because a black person didn't cross the street when a white person was walking down the sidewalk. Lynchings because a white person was not given the right of way when they were driving. Lynchings because a white person was not given the respect they felt they deserved. I think that's extreme. But they got away with it. They got away with lynchings and murders and violence as defensive actions taken in response to black violations of Jim Crow laws and Jim Crow etiquette. They got away with it because the cops were out there with them, helping them hang the noose. They got away with it because the jury was usually all white men, and the judge was their buddy. They got away with it because the Supreme Court was just as racist as they were. They got away with it because the president needed the vote of the Southern Bloc. So black people kept dying.